The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. 2 weeks ago, Bronx Assemblyman Eric Stevenson was arrested in a bribery scheme which officials said was designed to provide legislative favors for the operators of an adult daycare center in the Bronx. Lost in the ongoing and important dialogue about the morality of elected representation in the Bronx is discussion about the adult daycare industry itself. In fact, I'm willing to bet that many Bronxites don't even know what adult daycare is and what makes it so ripe to be in the center of allegations of political corruption in the Bronx. In fact, this growing industry in the Bronx and throughout the city appears to be one in need of attention, as there are many new social adult daycare facilities springing up using state Medicaid monies with little oversight or regulation. So that's our show tonight, Social Adult Daycare. What is it? And how did it find its way into a Bronx corruption scandal? And what, if anything, could and should be done about it? If you have some personal experience, or a relative of yours has personal experience with adult daycare in the Bronx that you'd like to share, or you have questions or comments, you can call in at 718-960-7241. You can also email comments or questions to us at BronxTalk@hotmail.com, and we read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Here in the studio is the policy analyst for aging services at United Neighborhood Houses, Karen Tinney. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And also from Albany, a Bronx Assemblyman who's on the Assembly's Aging Committee from the 87th Assembly District, Freshman Assemblyman Louis Sepulveda. Assemblyman, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Assemblyman, we're going to start here in the studio with Karen Tinney. Maybe you could define it for us and for our viewers. What is adult daycare? And then tangentially, what is medical adult daycare versus social adult daycare?
Okay, so thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, sure.
So there is no one, set definition. You can go to the state regulations and read it off, and you're like, oh, okay, I still don't understand what it is, right? So let me put it in contrast to a very common thing within the Bronx. You've got 92 of them, senior centers, right? People go, they have social activities, they go do bingo, they have yoga, tai chi, they have a nice meal, they go home, they socialize with their friends. Social adult daycare is, and that you can have up to 300 seniors coming a day with, probably about 15 to 10 volunteers, some staff members. Social adult daycare differs because the level of supervision and monitoring that you'll have in the center. You'll have a lot more staff to the patients who are coming to the social adult daycare. They have the seniors who are coming generally have a higher level disability than those who are going to the senior center. In order to be eligible for a social adult daycare, they have to have need assistance from somebody who needs help going to the bathroom, needs help eating. They can't lift a fork, or they're not sure what food to eat first, or how to chew, or they need prompting. They need assistance getting changed, or they need assistance getting around from another person. So the senior going to a social adult daycare in a group setting is somebody who probably wouldn't do so well in a bustling senior center environment. They need more attention, they need more time.
Now, what is the difference between that versus medical adult daycare? Because as you know, in the setting up of this program, I was inviting people and having dialogue about it, and yet I kept coming up, well, that's not us because we're medical adult daycare, not social adult daycare. What's the difference?
So it's another step of, it's another layer of services, right? So what social adult daycare doesn't have is physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, nurses on site providing, blood pressure monitoring, medication management. An adult daycare is almost a mini nursing home, but not within the walls of a nursing home. So they paid more attention to the medical needs. Now, the population that goes there is probably more physically frail than the social adult daycare. Some statistics show that social adult daycare is 70% of people who have a diagnosable dementia like Alzheimer's disease. So they don't necessarily need the health-related level of care that an adult daycare would offer, adult medical daycare.
People who were quoted in a Bronx Times article about the center that was involved in this scandal, the New Age Social Center on Jerome Avenue, many of the clients, patients, whoever they are, they said, you know what, this place has been a godsend. I need this place. I had no other place to turn, number one, for the social interaction, but also to get the kind of supports for basic things, going to the bathroom or eating or things like that, that they could have every day. What is the problem and what is the difference between ones that might not be caught up in the scandal and ones that potentially are not being, doing a good job, or in the old-fashioned statement, are Medicaid mills?
I wish I knew. I can take tons of guesses, right? Is they're bringing people in with, signs on the doors. I know the article that I read from the Bronx newspaper was they were like, enticing people to come in with manicures and food. Most senior centers in the Bronx have meals, or all of them do if they're run by the Department for the Aging. So I don't know what the clientele is. The social adult day center usually pay a fee, either private pay or through Medicaid they get reimbursed for it. Then I'm not really sure what's going on in these newer centers.
We're going to turn to the Assemblyman and talk about the legislation that might be needed, or certainly get his perspective in just a moment. As I understand it, to open an adult daycare center versus a medical facility or versus a senior center, you don't need a license, and there is technically no government agency required to run them. I'm not going to show you a close-up, so don't bother with a close-up, but I found this flyer that in my research was passed along for a adult daycare center on Westchester Avenue in the Bronx, and it says, creating a home away from home. It provides a vibrant, enriching, safe environment for older adults, and it lists many services, and it says it called for a free pickup. If you are a person in need, one would think this is a great situation for you, and you say, gee whiz, maybe this is the answer. This ad struck me as kind of being the problem, because it looks like the kind of ad that somebody says, low rent, or sell your home or something like that. Is this how we should be marketing the kinds of important, serious services that one would think these provide?
But therein lies the problem, Gary. The concept itself isn't what's wrong. The problem is that it's a highly unregulated segment of the adult care.
Yes.
And so you open yourself up to this kind of abuse. They're enticing seniors with all kinds of incentives, like you indicated, manicures, hairdressing, things of that nature. And there is the potential for abuse. The daycare that led to the problem with the Assemblyman in the Bronx, it wasn't so much the services that provided. It was the fact that they tried to, through legislation, to create a monopoly on this industry, an industry that, as I said, is heavily unregulated. And so there has to be some level of regulation. The senior centers are regulated. And so when you have this kind of situation where these people that were running this daycare center, when you have that kind of potential for situation, something has to happen. And what we're trying to work up here in Albany is we're going to start regulating these adult daycare centers.
Let me ask you just to backtrack and get a little background. One of the other things that I learned over the past week in trying to get my arms around what this was about and how we got to where we are, the way it was described is that when Governor Cuomo overhauled Medicaid, the idea was to make it easier for people to get services, so they backed off some of the regulations. In your understanding, do we now have to go relook at what Governor Cuomo did with Medicaid to say, you know what, now we got to go put regulations back in?
I think it was a critical mistake by the governor.
You do?
I strongly disagree with the governor's position on that, and I think that policy opened the door for what we have now. And you probably have this kind of a level of corruption with these centers throughout the city of New York. So now we're going to have to fix the problem that the governor created.
You know what's interesting, and I just it was really a learning experience for me all week. Much like other than Karen, who's an expert in it, but the rest of us don't really know a lot about it. So I, did a lot of Googling of adult daycare in the Bronx, and one of the things that just popped up, and I didn't have to go very far for it, was that there was one place that was literally for sale. It was like a property being sold. There is an asking price of $180,000. The real estate is $250,000. And it says business description, adult daycare center in the Bronx, unique business with extremely limited competition due to inability to obtain license contracts. And then what was really incredibly revealing, it says the competition, this is unique to the area and industry, and excellent reimbursement agreements with the managed care company. So they were very upfront about saying, you buy this from me, and you too can have a Medicaid mill. And the brazenness and the openness of it, frankly, struck me. Assemblyman, I'm sure it opens your eyes too.
Oh, no, I mean, there seems to be something inherently wrong when an adult daycare center becomes a turnkey operation. And the people that they service, as she indicated previously so eloquently, these are people that are subject to abuse. You don't know what happens in there with the care that they're offering, with the meals that they're offering. Since they're so unregulated, we don't know if, in fact, they're offering the kind of nutrition that some of these individuals, the seniors, need. So it's sort of like it's a crapshoot what you're going to get in there, and you don't know if people are going to start suffering from malnutrition. You don't know if people are getting the proper care, and it has to be regulated. And so that's something that we're going to start pushing on, especially because there's so many of them in the Bronx now. I want
to get back to Ms. Tinney here in the studio about. Which we had a very brief dialogue about before the show, and I want to expand on it. Senior centers, social daycare, medical daycare, there certainly are many medical facilities. If you are a person with a need of some sort, how can you possibly sort through what it is that you really need? How do you find out, gee whiz, I ought to call the local senior center, or I should find a social adult daycare center, or my needs are medical? You're kind of very vulnerable to all these kinds of ads that I was just talking about, where they say, we'll pick you up, and you're like, oh, gee whiz, I guess that's the place to get it. It really leaves the consumer at a big loss. How do you sort through it?
It's nearly impossible to sort through it, to put things into bins in terms of long-term care once you start to need it. I mean, caregivers spend 40 to 50 hours a week, caregivers of their parents spend 40 to 50 hours a week just trying to get services for their loved one, right? It's a maze. There's a lot of road traps in there. What we usually advise is call a geriatric care manager or a case manager.
And and I'm very serious about this.
Call 311 and ask the Department for the Aging for their case management program. That person who answers the phone will be able to run down an intake form with you to figure out what your needs might be. Now, these case managers are experts in their community. They know what's out there that can at least point you in the right direction.
And you can actually
And they're not getting profit from this.
You can actually access that from 311.
Yes.
I think that's very important because I think people are wondering if
who's my case management agency? That's what they should ask, in my district.
Is there a way, if you see an ad like this and you say, gee whiz, this is down the block for me, or whatever it is there a way of finding out if they're going to deliver the services that they really claim to deliver? Or there's no way until you walk through the door?
I would guess there's no way to know
Wow.
until you walk through the door. That's why you really want to provide, rely on those providers who've been there a long time. They're nonprofit, mission driven. There's many social adult day programs like that in the city.
Clearly, there's a need for social adult daycare, models of providing supervised care, and they will be increasingly relied upon as Medicaid budgets shrink and all
Yeah.
those kinds of things. How big is the need? And in a way, on one hand, I'm saying, you know what, we have to be careful about all the people providing these services. On the other hand, I'm saying, gee whiz, we have people who need these services. You know what I'm saying? How can you assess the need for us?
Absolutely, right? So I put it in terms of, supply and demand. As we all know, baby boom started happening in 2011. We are exponentially growing the older adult population. To give some reference, when this baby boom, this 24 years of the older adult population hit the school systems, the schools had to expand. When they started getting married, the housing market had to expand to fit all the seniors. The workforce, the number of jobs expanded as well. So now this older adult population is hitting older age, their older years. We need to start looking at what community-based services are needed to support them in their homes and communities. The problem also is that they're living longer, and they're living longer with disabilities.
I would say the problem, that's a nice thing. That
It's a
people are
nice thing
living
that
longer.
people are living longer, but we need to support those who don't have the means to do it, through a healthy social support system.
So, Assemblyman, faced with this idea that we have, certainly in the Bronx, a needy population, an increasing population, certainly as the baby boomers get older, give me an idea of how you think this should be legislated without, frankly, breaking the state's Medicaid bank, which, of course, we know what large percentage of our, tax dollar goes to health care.
Well, before that, Gary, I want to tell you that another source of information that can guide the seniors as to where to go, they can go to their senior centers, because a lot of these senior centers have social workers. So if they have greater needs in terms of health care, in terms of assistance, the social workers that can guide them. Also, in my office, we're creating a system where we can advise people, the seniors that need the assistance, where to go, where not to go, and warn them about these adult daycare centers that are unscrupulous. So it's important that we get the information out to the seniors, to their families, and help them get these centers, help them go to the correct place. It's very important that we provide that communication.
I'm going to go back to the question I asked you, but I just wanted to jump in. Ms. Tinney, if you go to a senior center, as the Assemblyman suggests, would they be likely to suggest that you go to a social adult daycare center, or would they say, well, you're here, just stay with us and play bingo over here?
It depends on the senior.
And
right?
it depends on the center. If they're overburdened, maybe they would say, here's somebody who can handle your needs.
It's a possibility. If somebody is who has a disability and they're having a hard time getting around in the senior center, they're just not thriving. Our goal is to make seniors thrive, right? We don't want them to just survive. We want them to thrive. So if the senior center sees that they're not able to meet the needs of the senior, which is unlikely, because there are some pretty wonderful services offered at the senior center. Yeah, they might refer out to a social adult day center. Or if they're starting to pick up on somebody who is having dementia, again, go back to the social adult day model is really for people who have dementia. If you're starting to pick up on that, they might be better off in a smaller environment.
As opposed to a larger senior center where you might get
300 people.
It's very interesting. And the one thing, and there are a number of things that I'd love my viewers to take out of this. One of the things that I would love for people to take out of it is reach out. Don't make a decision without consulting. Ms. Tinney talked about going to 311. The Assemblyman talked about going to the senior center or checking his office or another legislative office. Don't sit by yourself and make a decision. If you're a caregiver, I think that applies. Assemblyman, back to the legislative question, because this is something that undoubtedly in the Aging Committee and in dialogue in the Assembly is going to fall to you. What do you think? How do we set this up so that the model works and it doesn't take advantage of our friends and neighbors in the Bronx?
Well, we have to work. A lot of it has to be. We have to work with the Department of Aging. We have to see what prior to the current policy with the governor, see how they're handling the legislative part of it. Look at the good parts of that, look at the budget, look how much money we have to actually monitor these things, and come up with a comprehensive plan that's going to legislate, that's going to regulate, that's going to make sure that these adult daycare centers don't run the way they're running now.
Mm-hmm.
Look, we're right now, as a result of what's happened recently, we're going back to that. The Committee on Aging is looking into that because there's no set answer right now. There's something new we didn't know about what was going on.
Well, it didn't
Now,
exist before.
as everything, something has to happen for you to start looking at it carefully and figure out the best way to monitor these things. I mean, what we do know is that we just can't continue the way it's going now.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Tinney, in your dialogue with people at the United Neighborhood Houses, what are they saying? They say, gee, if we could only do, what would you like to see? Is there legislation? Because now you can tell the Assembly directly what you want.
I think I've actually talked to the Assembly member about it. We've talked to a lot of people. I don't have a bullet point list of what should be done. Some regulation would be helpful. Ratios of staff to patients within a social adult daycare center. Some sort of registry so that if you're going to operate a social adult day center, we know where you are in the city so that we're just at least having eyes on it.
Do we need a licensing procedure that might be similar to whether it be a senior center or some other facility? Or is that going to overburden the state and yet another agency is going to say, you know what, I don't want to deal with it?
We welcome the conversation about licensure, right? And from a provider perspective, a consumer perspective, we welcome the conversation. I'm not against it. But let me tell you, I come from the nursing home world where everything was medicalized and over-regulated, so that you couldn't just put a soft, cushy chair in the hallway so somebody could sit down and feel like they're at home. Nursing homes across the country are going through this change of trying to change from a facility-based to a more home-like environment. I don't want to go to jump to let's make it over-regulated and medicalized so that somebody feels foreign in a center where they're supposed to feel like they're at home, right?
Assemblyman, an ombudsman or somebody like that, a czar, as it were, of social adult daycare? What do you think?
No, I mean, we don't need a czar. We need some level. We need some level of regulations that, we're here from one extreme to another. You have these centers that have absolutely no regulation, and the opposite side is what happens in nursing homes. Look, there's no reason why you can't reach a midpoint where the concerns of the seniors, the safety of the seniors that she indicated, licensing, nutrition. If you're providing nutrition, who's providing this nutrition? What guidelines are they using? If there's a senior with diabetes.
We may have lost the Assemblyman there just for a moment with some technical thing, but Ms. Tinney, are you concerned now because of this scandal in the Bronx and the fact that people like me are starting to talk about it on TV, that all of a sudden the people who are doing the right thing in the good centers that you may have are all of a sudden going to say, wow, guess what? Now my burden is greater, much like it was with Head Start, and everything else becomes overregulated, and now I can't possibly manage it. Financially, the numbers don't add up because I'm so overburdened with regulation. Is that a concern right
Absolutely a concern.
So maybe we should stop talking about it.
But you know what? You're bringing the conversation to the table, which is the important part, right? Because there are things that we want to keep. We want to keep the flexibility of the model so that we can respond to the needs of the people who come to our centers. We want to keep it so that we have meal time so that the people can sit and talk to each other, that it's not so, this portion size is like, a square of a brick, right? We want to make sure that if you have a population in your area that is, Hindu speaking, that you have Hindu speaking staff who can really welcome people into the center.
I know the Assemblyman has a wonderful relationship with the Bangladeshi community in his district, so I'm assuming that's the kind of thing and the kind of sensitivity you would support wholeheartedly.
Well, Gary, I like to think I have a wonderful relationship with all my constituents, but yes.
I couldn't hear that.
That's
We
what I'm
make
saying.
it
These
a
are the
touch
kinds
louder
of things
down
that you
here.
have to
That'd
be
be great.
vigilant about. And, maybe we should hire the young lady in the studio to be the czar.
I want to just mention one other thing that I as part of my Google search, there was an adult, social adult daycare center that has a Facebook page. And the pictures looked lovely. There was music and there seemed to be all kinds of things. But one person said, and I won't mention the person's name, but she said, it's nice, but you have to join their medical component in order to be part of their center. So I'm wondering, Ms. Tinney, do you think that's the kind of thing that's good? Because we're saying, well, now if you come to our social adult daycare center, we're assuring that you're getting some medical coverage, or is it yet another scam that we're going to be able to sell you managed care services in order to get you, rope you in, because we'll pick you up at home and give you all those nice daycare things?
So I think it's important to pay attention to people's medical needs, but not put it in your face every single day. Like, these are places like your living room. You want to think about it, that provides the support and supervision and a nutritious, meal.
So you don't want it to be required, but you like the idea that it may be available.
Absolutely.
Assemblyman, we're almost out of time. So what do you take out of this, and what is your commitment going to be when you get up into the aging committee and in other dialogues in the assembly? What are you going to be trying to do?
Well, we've already started that conversation. You're trying to weigh the concept of the adult daycare center with the proper amount of regulations. You consider the audience. I mean, these are seniors that are vulnerable. These are seniors that can be taken advantage of. And we have to look at all these factors and try to come up with the most sensible regulation, so that we don't have these issues that we're having now with these adult daycare centers.
Do you think the dialogue is going to happen? We know how long it takes in Albany. Is that dialogue happening now, or are we still a little ways from letting the dust settle and moving on? Just give me a time frame, or you don't know.
Well, no, it's happening now as far as I'm concerned. We have several members on the committee. This blight happened in the Bronx in my county. And so, as one of the few representatives on the aging committee from the Bronx, I can tell you that I'm taking this extremely seriously. My staff.
We're out of time, so we got to run. We do want to thank you for joining us, and as the dialogue picks up, we hope you'll continue to be part of that dialogue. Karen Tinney, we're going to put up the contact info for UNHNY.org, which is the United Neighborhood Houses. They provide wonderful services. As we know, they have many wonderful centers in the Bronx. So anybody who wants to access that or contact you, they can do that. We appreciate your time this evening. Folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at BronxTalk@hotmail.com, and we read those on the air during future editions of our program. Archives of Bronx Talk are available at BronxNet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar. Also, please become a fan of Bronx Talk on Facebook. We're here every Monday night, of course. We talk about all the important issues in the Bronx, thanks to producer Jane Folloro. Our director is former Lehman Lightning Shirley Arrieta, and the studio coordinator today and every week is Dina. And we'll see you next week. Goodbye.